A clean cooking startup, Koko Networks, that once promised a greener future is now in administration with PwC stepping in to take control. Meanwhile, CinetPay customers are still chasing over $1 million months after an alleged cyber attack. And in the world of digital finance, trust is the one currency you cannot afford to lose. On the flip side, we see Google is making a bold move to localize AI for African languages, raising big questions about access, power, and who really benefits. And in Kenya, we see the Kenya Revenue Authority bringing in AI to capture anyone who does nil returns, yet they actually have an income. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tech Tides Africa podcast. My name is Karen. I'm coming to you from Kenya, and I'm joined by Kelvin. Hello, Kelvin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Had a number of things to do over the weekend, but as always, I'm looking forward to the podcast and talking with you on Mondays.
Awesome. I am not doing very well. I'm a bit angry right now and a bit worried, but we're going to talk about it on the last topic that we tackled today. I'm just going to jump into the first topic that we're looking at today, which is PwC is taking over Koko Networks after administration. Now, Koko Networks is one of the few startups in Kenya that has actually been working really well, but it seems they've been struggling financially for quite some time, and now they have gotten to the end of the road as a result of something not being signed by the Ministry of Environment. They were hoping to sell carbon credits. That hasn't gone through, and we're seeing them get into administration, which is really, really a sad occurrence because their solution was clearly working, which is why they were in millions of households, low-income households in Kenya. And at some point, my brothers had a Koko Networks cooker in their house, and it was such a lifesaver for when they didn't have enough money for gas, which is a lot more expensive. And so this is a sad one for me because I do think it's actually a company that holds a lot of promise, and it being closed down simply because someone in the ministry decides this is not something we want to go ahead with raises a lot of questions for me.
Yeah, when I saw the headline, I was very fascinated by it because I saw clean cooking startup and I was like, oh, what are they building? And as I researched on them, it seems they were building something very useful. In the sense they were trying to combine clean energy with the startup framework and also carbon credits. So they were doing a number of things together. And it looks like a startup that was actually quite useful because of the backing it got. It got a lot of backing from investors as well. But it seems, like you said, they ran into some financial issues. I think I also saw somewhere that there was a ban put on bioethanol, and they had to start buying locally, which increased the price. And then the margins became very slim. So very sad one indeed, especially because this was a startup that was actually solving a real problem.
Yeah, I agree, because a lot of low-income homes in Kenya, especially if you're living in the city, obviously if you're living in the rural areas, that's easy. We use firewood or we use charcoal. The ones who are living in the city have a real problem because most of them will use kerosene, and it can be quite expensive. And so with Koko, with 30 Kenya shillings, that's less than $1, you will be able to cook your meal, and it works like normal gas. So it was really, really helpful. And the burner was a 2-burner. It was a really good product. It is a really good product. And I'm hoping that despite the fact that they've gone into administration, that we will see them become healthy again and go back to business. I'm hoping that PwC will help them get there, because I do believe that this is a product that has actual promise, not just in the Kenyan market, but I think in the African context as a whole.
Yeah, it does. Maybe it will be one of the few cases we see a startup come out of administration. It will be good to see, but only time will tell. Moving on, CinetPay owes customers $1 million months after cyber attacks. So an Ivorian payment processor, CinetPay, had some cyber attacks in September of last year. and it resulted in a lot of losses for them. Because of this, they are now in turn having challenges paying their customers. And this is something that, in case of the cyber attack, they were attacked simultaneously across 3 different countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, and Burkina Faso, which seems like a very well planned attack. And now they are having some trouble paying, and it looks like this is a startup that's struggling at the moment. Last year, we talked a lot about cyber attacks. It doesn't seem like that problem is going away anytime soon. So now would be a good time to talk about cybersecurity communities or learning cybersecurity as a skill. I saw a comment on one of our previous podcasts when we were talking about learning cybersecurity, and someone said, yeah, they are definitely going back to learn that. So the opportunities at the moment, if you're studying cybersecurity, I believe there are opportunities. But coming back to the story, this is a huge loss, and I wonder how they'll figure this out.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. And obviously, we've always said that cybersecurity is expensive to implement, but it's even more expensive when you are the victim of an attack. This issue has raised a couple of questions for me, though. It seems that CinetPay had just been licensed as a small group of payment fintechs that are authorized to operate within the West African Monetary Union by the Central Bank of West Africa States. And the license allows holders to process payments across member countries like Senegal, Benin, Togo, etc. But the license has a few minimum requirements. For example, you need to have a capital of 100 million. You have to have robust governance, strong anti-fraud and AML controls. You need to have the right technical infrastructure. All of these are designed to prevent security lapses. So there are a couple of questions that I find myself asking. Number one, how robust is their insurance buffer? Is it that the reserves that they have in case of an issue like this are not enough? Because based on my understanding, when you are holding client funds, there are certain requirements that should be set in place. There needs to be a buffer that you have that is not touched, just in case something goes wrong. Then you plug into that buffer to secure your customers. So those are some of the questions that I'm beginning to ask myself when it comes to West Africa, but also Africa as a whole. How are we protecting customers in the financial industry? Are these things simply put on paper but not in practice? What is it that is going on? Because insurance should have kicked in by now based on what happened. There should be investigations that have been done because it's been a few months. So it brings in a lot of worry for me in terms of how, as a continent, we're putting in place laws and implementing those laws in order to ensure that we are protecting clients.
Yeah, it's worrying. Like you said, there should be reserves in situations like this. And this is a private company, so only them would know, as well as the government officials that gave them this license. But that's one side of it. The other side of it is to be attacked on 3 fronts simultaneously. And it seems the attackers went about it in a clever way because they were withdrawing smaller funds that wouldn't set off these anti-fraud mechanisms that would normally kick off in situations where they start to see large money moving on. And maybe there is some insider cooperation going on because, like, how do you lose all of that money and all of your cybersecurity doesn't kick in to flag that something is wrong? But yeah, there are just a lot of questions. In this case, CinetPay's customers were businesses as well. So you have also put those businesses under stress. Yeah, it looks like a very messy situation. And hopefully in the coming weeks, we would get answers to some of these questions.
Yes, absolutely. I do think that there must have been, but that those are opinions, obviously, that there's some some dirty things going on internally, but we don't know. No judgment on that. We will wait and see what the report shows. On to the next thing. Google is expanding AI localization for African languages. They're building a speech database to improve AI tools across African languages. The initiative is supposed to enhance voice recognition, translation, and AI accessibility, which I think is a good idea. Obviously, I would have preferred for it to be done by African organizations, but Google does have the muscle and the power to do this. Obviously, as an African continent, sub-Saharan Africa, we have more than 2,000 languages. So it is quite the endeavor, and they're not planning to go all the way. I think they're doing 21 languages to start with, and they're using different universities to do that. There's one in Uganda. I believe there's one in Ghana that they are using to do this project. And I think it will be useful for things like agricultural advisory tools, customer service, making sure that we are able to talk to the local people in a language that they understand. And we've always said on the Startup Graveyard, and I think also on Tech Tides, that localization is an important part of marketing and building products that are localized to the people. And I think these AI language tools is one of the ways that we are seeing localization become more and more of an important thing for startups and for companies in tech and in every other industry as they come into the African market.
Yeah, Google has always had like a big interest in languages, and you see over the years they build tools that help people connect to each other. While, yeah, like you said, there is something to be said for Africans building for Africans. They did have collaboration with universities in Africa on this project. So there is that input. I'm guessing Google is kind of the infrastructure to host this database, and they are getting collaboration from the universities that are doing the actual legwork and trying to gather source material. What this database gives is if someone wants to build AI language tools in the future, you can go to this database and you have enough data that you can use to train your own AI models and build AI tools that are closer to the people that you're building for. So I believe it's going to be a very important resource because it's open source. I mean, it means anybody can build on it. It's a welcome development. Last year, we did see the Nigerian government do something similar, building a language model for Nigerian languages as well. So more and more efforts like this are taking place across Africa as a way to preserve African languages. So the more initiatives like this, the more tools that come out like this, the better we will be at when it comes to preserving African languages in the 21st century, because things are just moving rapidly. So moving on, Namibia calls for increased 4G device adoption. So apparently in Namibia, many people are still not yet on 4G. And the challenge is that the phones that support 4G are quite expensive for the average Namibian. So they are just not yet on 4G as much as a lot of other African countries are there. In fact, last year we did talk a lot about 5G. A number of countries were trying to set up the infrastructure for 5G. And then here on the other side of Africa, you see that the country has still not yet gotten to the 4G adoption yet. What are some of the ways that can make this happen? Not too sure, don't really have answers, but it's quite interesting that we are speaking about 5G and somewhere else on the continent, they are still trying to get 4G adoption.
Yeah, sometimes I think when you're living in one of the big four countries in Africa, some of these things become so normal that you don't realize there are countries where this is not the norm. And I think this article really humbled me today to see that these telecom companies are spending money to roll out infrastructure. So their return on investment must be really horrible because you're building the infrastructure, but you don't have the clientele to use it. And it brings back the question that we are always asking: are you developing for the actual problems of your country, or are you running after what everybody else is doing? Because if majority of your country cannot afford these devices, perhaps your focus should be on raising the standards of living. Now, I don't know whether that involves 4G adoption. I really don't know. I wouldn't call myself an expert in that space. It just raises some questions for me in terms of, was the Namibian market ready for 4G in any way, shape, or form? I don't know. Maybe that's the question to ask. Maybe they have to run some kind of test or experiment to see if the devices are brought down in prices, people will embrace 4G. I wonder how the online market is, how digital spaces in Namibia work. Is it as big as they are in, let's say, Nigeria and Kenya? Because a lot of the economy in Kenya and Nigeria is driven by online work, and everything is online. Every company has a website, is on social media. Our lives are being driven online. Now, when you move, the first thing you're thinking is, can I get Wi-Fi? When you go to a restaurant, that's the first thing you're thinking. Is it similar for other countries? Becomes a big question for us and for founders as we build things in the tech space. It raised a lot of questions for me, to be honest, Kelvin.
Yeah, sometimes we get carried away by the things that are already around us that we forget that it isn't the same everywhere. And like you said, we need to think about who we are building for while we are building. Because like you said, the telcos have invested all this money building the infrastructure, and then the customers are not there. So I wonder how they'll resolve this. Maybe they can create some subsidies to encourage people to get these devices, or maybe they channel the efforts into something else. I don't know. But yeah, it's a very puzzling situation at the moment in Namibia.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a story we should follow and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because while devices are kind of expensive, we're seeing a lot of cheaper devices coming into the market. I don't know about Nigeria, but in Kenya, we're seeing devices becoming quite affordable in the market.
Yeah.
Things like Infinix and Techno, they create a lot more affordable devices for the average Kenyan. So I wonder why that is not the case in Namibia, because for as little as $30 in Kenya, maybe 60, you can have a smartphone.
Yeah, we have similar in Nigeria as well. Those brands you mentioned, they do target areas like this. So that's why it's also puzzling for me, this situation in Namibia.
Yeah, so perhaps we should maybe investigate what is the average income per household in Namibia. It might be quite low, and then you wonder then, if this is the case, why are you focused on 4G when your people are clearly trying to raise their standards of living? But that's a question for the government and economists, and not for me. Moving on to one of the few institutions in the world that I fear with all my heart, Kelvin. With the same degree that you love Jumia, this is the degree that I fear Kenya Revenue Authority. I fear these people with all my soul. They can just destroy your life. So Kenya Revenue Authority is starting to use AI. So we usually do our tax returns between January and June, and they put a stop to anyone who wanted to do nil returns. And that is because they were implementing this project that will introduce AI to check your income and see if you're lying, because what they have noticed is that a lot of people who are contractors, who are professionals, are earning income and yet doing nil returns, despite the fact that they're actually making a good living. So the AI is going to filter through your life, filter through data from everywhere, from the electronic tax income management system, we call it eTIMS, which captures transactions across the economy, linking suppliers, customers, transaction values, to withholding tax certificates that you've probably been given by a customer, to customs records if you've imported a vehicle, a luxury car, and then you have said that you have zero income, that's going to be a red flag, to mobile money platforms to show your cash flows, vehicle registration data from the authority. So it's going to be combing through all your information and seeing if you're lying when you do a nil tax return. So it's going to be chaos for a lot of professionals and contractors. Now, the reason why I have mixed feelings about this is I think people should pay their taxes. I think it's only fair that taxes are paid. They run the country, absolutely. And I think that if there's a way to fill in the gaps where taxes are not being paid, then that should be done. That's number one. However, I think the biggest problem that we have as a country and the reason why people don't pay taxes is because we do not see where these taxes go. And with the constant news coming up of graft and corruption and embezzlement, a lot of Kenyans feel I'm going to get overtaxed because as a country, we are one of the most overtaxed countries in the world. So I'm paying 30-40% taxes for someone to go and buy a new car, for them to just use that money to buy new land and buy hotels while I am struggling to feed my kids. You know, it's a very philosophical question that I don't think has an answer, but it really annoys me. I do believe in paying taxes, especially when a country is working, when you're seeing where your taxes are going. When you live in places like the Netherlands and places like those where you actually see what your taxes are doing, then I don't think there's any citizen who would refuse to pay taxes. But when you're living in a country where your members of parliament, your leaders are paid exorbitantly well, and yet still you're seeing them embezzle funds, it becomes a big challenge to pay your taxes faithfully. So that's my rant, and I'm done.
I think you just ranted on behalf of Kenyans and Nigerians as well, because when I was going to talk about this topic, I was also going to say similar things because we have similar reservations in Nigeria as well when it comes to paying taxes. When taxes work and you can see this in developed countries, when it works, it's really beneficial for society. But in a situation where it's not working, and I believe in places like Nigeria and Kenya, it's not working as well as it could be working if they were putting the taxes to as much of the use that it's meant for than because maybe they will argue that they are using it for themselves. I don't know. I always have reservations with taxes. In this particular case, nil returns basically means you're declaring that you don't have any taxable income, and they are bringing this AI tool to check to make sure that indeed you don't have taxable income, else you'll be in trouble. And yeah, we are seeing a lot of tax initiatives across Africa earlier in the year and towards the end of the last year. For us in Nigeria, we had new tax policies, and the policies were to widen the tax nets. So they are putting an eye now on digital services, freelancers, remote workers, because it was a gray area in Nigeria before now. But now they are well defined into how they should be taxed. There are a lot of tax initiatives from what I'm seeing going on, at least in Nigeria and Kenya. I just wish we could see more from what they were doing with the taxes.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's very annoying that as Africans we are so highly taxed, and then our countries still remain in this really horrible situations. Like in Kenya, we're seeing our parents going to hospitals and not getting what they need. We're seeing pensions disappear. It's very. Let's stop there. Let's.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good use of AI. Let's say this is a good use of AI. We can celebrate what is true. I think it is a good use of AI. Yeah.
I mean, it depends. It depends. Is it really a good use of AI? Because I always say the power of technology is in the hands of the person using it. And so if the person using it is using it for good, then the technology is good. But if the person using it is using it for evil, then maybe technology is bad. But then technology is neutral. It just depends on whose hands it's in. And then if you now apply that in this current context based on the things we have said, is it really good?
I think it's good. I think it would be better if in the same way they put in AI to show us who's stealing money. Put in an AI program, and if any money is embezzled, if anything disappears, let it show us as citizens that this money has disappeared and this is the person who's responsible for it. And this is the court proceedings, this is when they were accused, this is when they went to jail. That would also be a good use of AI.
Yeah, now that is a good use of AI.
I don't think it would ever see the light of day, but
Nope.
I would like to see that development. It would also be a good use of AI if KRA could actually show the taxpayers on a monthly or yearly basis, this is what we collected and this is where all that tax went. This is what it was used for. I think I would like to see AI used in those ways as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, to track all these things. This is what was collected. This is what it went into. This is what disappeared. And these are the court cases regarding that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Definitely.
Yes, we finished our rants.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Tech Tides Africa podcast. Remember, leave a comment or share with your friends. We'll see you next Thursday at the same time and place you get your podcast. Until then, stay well.